You got to your meeting and you stood up and said, "Hello, my name is Andrew. It's been 25 days since I've been to the Temple Diana, or whatever, the life you're leaving behind, and I am adhering to be a follower in the way of Christ," right? And you got together in this way in which you spoke openly and honestly, both about the things you're trying to become about, but also the things that you're having to leave behind that may cause grief work, right? Because not all choices are easy. Choices have consequences. We've talked about here before, one of my favorite teachers, if you will, was a colleague in ministry that who I worked with. She was in charge of youth group, and she was phenomenal at reminding the youth that if they said, "Well, I can't come to youth group next week, it's my grandfather's birthday," and she's like, "That's great. That's a good choice. You've made a choice about there's somewhere else you need to be, and I support that choice," right? And it's okay for you to tell me that tonight this wasn't the most important thing to do. We made those choices in the last week when we had to say, like, is it safe to traverse the roads to get to worship? Why does that choice make sense in a world in which you can worship online? Now, a couple of you confessed that worshiping online, you thought, do I make the choice to go back in person? Because that's a pretty cool choice. Right? We have choices that confront us every day, and sometimes we are hesitant to be honest about those choices. We hesitate to realize that we might offend someone if we had to admit that they weren't what we chose. Even though it would make perfect sense that you would never miss your grandfather's birthday. In the road to discipleship that happens in Luke 9. So Luke 9 is a pivotal moment in the Gospel of Luke, right? So it says that Jesus then turns his face towards Jerusalem. And everything that is going to follow in Luke up until Holy Week is done in light of the looming cross, the looming death that Jesus has told his disciples awaits him there. Right? And so that begins in Luke 9. And then we get this series of discipleship moments. A series of people who want to follow in the way of Jesus Christ. I invite you to go read the rest of chapter 9 later, because we couldn't read it all today. Because if I make the choice to read 30 verses, you make the choice to go. A series of people who want to follow Jesus are going to ask him to do so, but Jesus is going to sense in them that there's something that is holding on to them. There's a gravity they're not ready to walk away from, and so he turns them down as disciples. Now, we don't know that means that Jesus never accepts their desire to follow. What Jesus, I think, is getting at is you've got to be willing to let go of the things that claim you more than you want to be claimed by this calling. Right? So Jesus says to them, which is going to happen in all the gospel texts in a different way, but if you've watched my sermon teaser, you know where I'm about to go here, right? So Jesus is going to tell them the nature of discipleship is to pick up your cross and follow me. Now, we hear that as those who understand what the cross has come to mean, but to his disciples, none of that has happened yet, right? So basically what he is telling them is you're going to have to pick up death. You're going to have to pick up a suffering death. And this is what happens in Luke's gospel. Why I wanted to talk about it in conjunction with this Mark text. Because he doesn't say you have to pick up your cross and follow me. He says you have to pick up your cross daily. Daily. Visuals that come into my head. I can picture it, right? I've silenced my alarm 3 times so it doesn't wake up Caroline, and I'm still not going into worship, and I'm thinking, will they worship if I don't show up? You know, whatever. However that morning is going, right? I finally decide it's time to get up. and I roll out of bed, and I, the morning goes on, I get my clothes on, I go to my windowsill. I don't know why I keep them on my windowsill, and I grab my wallet, and I grab my keys, and I do the pat, right? Like, okay, yeah, there's lumps where everything's supposed to be, right? And then I turn around and go, because there's a cross propped up in the corner of my bedroom, right? There isn't really, by the way. But I imagine it, right? And I go, ooh, am I going to take that with me today? It's really heavy. And it creates the most awkward conversations. I think I'm just going to leave it today. I don't think I really want that defining my day. If any would come and follow me, they have to pick up their cross daily. I hear you, Jesus. But it's really a buzzkill. Have you ever? We have this little 6-foot cross, and whenever I'm bringing it in for Good Friday, I always feel like I'm Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross for Jesus. It's a thing. I'll lend it to you if you want. It's a thing to carry a cross, right? And so you make the choice. You're going to make the choice today. Are you going to let this define your life? Are you going to let this be the core value of all core values that guides how the rest of this day goes? Because it won't be quiet on your back, right? It's going to continually claim your every interaction. That's why I think Luke gets something really right. Luke held on to that nugget that got lost in the others. I'm sure of it, because I'm sure Jesus, the guy who's kind of prickly, if we're being honest. I mean, words of eternal life, yes. The kind of prickly I want in my life, yes. Prickly, yes. Daily. Are you going to be this person? Or are you going to just try to blend in better today? And so you pick up your cross. You remember that, that my life is not first and foremost about me. It's not about me. But we remember that, the two great commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and your neighbor as yourself. You can't love yourself more than your neighbor. You can't love yourself more than God, not while you're carrying that cross, because you died to that life, right? You let go of that life. I love to remind people that we talk about how bad peer pressure is, but we don't recognize that we actually love peer pressure too. Running groups are peer pressure. Your book group is a peer pressure group. Your Stitch group is a peer pressure group, right? The choir showed up last Sunday. I had more people behind me than in front of me, and that's because they're a peer pressure group, right? Now, we don't say they're bad peer pressure because we think that the values they're reinforcing in us are positive, they're life-giving, they're the cross that we carry, right? When we think it's bad peer pressure, we think that it's people who are reinforcing values that tear life down, that tear other people down, that make your life less abundant, not more abundant, that put you more in touch with the tomb than the resurrection, right? Even though a lot of times it's fun along the way. And so when Jesus says daily, are you going to pick up your cross? It's what entanglements are you going to let go of? Bonnie at First Light said, I think it was interesting, why fishermen? The easy answer is that it's Galilee and there's a lake there. And a lot of people fished. And you did, once you washed out of religious education, it being the best education, right? Or in some cases, the only education. And once you washed out of that, you went to work with your family, right? And so why fishermen? Because they're in Galilee and there are fishermen there. Or I think there's something fun about this play of the literal and figurativeness of dropping nets, right? Because nets snare you. Nets get you all tangled up. Nets get you where you can't figure out which way's up and down and right and left. You know, you can get into all these deep sea problems, right? The trolling fishing ships that are trying to get the fish that can be sold on the market. The problem is nets are indiscriminate, right? And so they get the dolphins in there, they get the turtles in there, they literally drown the fish who get ensnared and can no longer be free. And we get ensnared too. So the cross, for all that it is a burden, is also a choice to be free of the nets that have entangled us. The nets we maybe chose to be in, but whose consequences have turned out to be terrible for us. And that's a scary place. It's a scary place to sit at the precipice of change and say, can I do that? I don't know. My favorite illustration of that is the top of, and I'm a northern Midwesterner, so when there's a top of a black diamond ski hill for us, because we had to make the hill, there's a lot of people on a single hill, right? And we don't encounter steep things in our life. So one of my favorite illustrations from childhood skiing is there'd be like 30 people, right? And they're at the edge of the black diamond hill, and they're going, ooh, that's steeper than I remember. And you get in this long debate, right? And the longer you stand there, what? The steeper it gets, right? And the more you start going like, well, this was kind of fun. And there's a long way down. Right? And when I was a kid, because falling doesn't really matter when you're 2 feet tall, right? I used to love to just blitz through those packs of people, go right over, straight down. You didn't have to turn, right? Not a lot of gravity. Same amount of gravity, not a lot of mass. But we get in that position in our life a lot, right? We're sitting at the precipice and we're saying, I don't know if I can do that. So I may be caught in this net, but I know this net. Right? And what I think Jesus captivatingly does for us is says, here, take my hand. We can do this together. What Christian community does says, here, take our hands. We're going to do this together. I don't know what's down there either. But I think what's down there is the words of eternal life. What I think is down there is an amazing new adventure. And if not, there's a ski lift. But we're going to do it together. When we let go of this, we also get to hold on to this. This is the word of the Lord.